Kirby Smart's ready for a behind the scenes, the likes of which you've never seen before at Jupiter Island, Florida, near Matt's place down there. He's wanting to do all of the former assistant coaches that worked for Nick Saban and all of the stories from behind the scenes there from Nick's time at LSU and Alabama. That would be like Mark D'Antonio from the old coach at Michigan State, Jimbo, Kirby, Mario Cristobal, Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Loxley. I think they should have everybody, but maybe Lane has to be like in a separate space, padded walls. Your comment on the notion that Kirby wants all this. I mean, like he could be talking about what went into the call to go to Tua in 2017.
Yeah, or the call in the 2012 SEC championship. I guess there's a lot to talk about between all those guys. It sounds like a great reality TV show, better than what I get stuck with watching with my wife. I'm not sure she would be interested in this, but I sure would. It seems like a lot of football guys getting together. And it seems like a lot of these coaches are, I don't know if they're friends with Kirby, but they've got a good relationship with them. There's a lot of respect with Kirby and these other coaches. I mean, every press conference to the beginning of the weeks, Kirby said, "Oh, I respect Coach X, Coach Y, Coach Z for what they've been able to accomplish. I used to coach against him, or I used to coach with him." So I can only imagine the stories they've got. We've heard some basketball stories of them playing pickup basketball. I think I've seen online about a big golf story where they're in a meeting and then they have like just 30 seconds to grab their clubs, hit some plane to get down to Florida to play golf with Nick Saban because their time is so limited. And we see that with Kirby now. I don't know how many times Kirby and his staff get to play golf. It's not a lot. They don't have that much time. But of course, all these coaches are going on to do big, great things and win championships and so on. So was Jim McElwain part of that crew too?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's something that I'd be interested in for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, all of this stuff behind the scenes is always very curious. I mean, I would be curious to know. I mean, wouldn't it be even more curious to know? At Georgia would be Jake Fromm, Justin Fields, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason, the entire disaster that was the 2020 season. I've done some reporting on the back end of the 2020 season, and it was that whole year was so challenging. Nick got COVID on Wednesday. Is that right? Of that game, do you remember
I
that
think so.
that week, Georgia, Alabama,
Which time? 17?
in 20 when it
In
was at
20?
Tuscaloosa.
Oh, well, yeah. COVID didn't start till 2020. That's right. I don't remember that specifically. I'm sure you broke the story. I just didn't read it, but
No, it was the thing about coaches are really big gossips. Frankly, um,
yeah, that's
go
right.
ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
They like to talk. They like to get information, and you have to share information to get information. These coaches know a lot of people, and they are looking for any advantage they can get. They'll they don't mind talking, but uh, you're right. I think that'd be really cool. Between how to stop that 2019 LSU team. I think the recruitment, the end of Jacob Eason, where Georgia had him, and then Kirby got the job and had to keep him after that last minute visit to Florida. Then it was kind of he's choosing between Georgia and Florida. So
That
yeah,
was
that's pretty
I was
wild.
alive for that one. I
Yeah,
was a little bit behind
yeah.
the scenes on that
The
whole thing.
the the Malcolm Mitchell commitment down
Yeah.
in Valdosta. I've heard some stories about that.
Isaiah
So
Crowell. You and I were talking about
yeah,
Isaiah Crowell. Or do people not know who Isaiah Crowell is now? That's amazing.
he was only at Georgia for 1 year. It happened 13 years ago,
Yeah.
and right after him, people remember Todd Gurley. And I guess Keith Marshall and that whole thing, they only needed Isaiah Crowell for that 1 year. Because if he were there in 2012, he would have just taken carries and snaps away from Todd Gurley.
He he
But
he would have,
Isaiah
but
Crowell was a good pro for
I,
3
Isaiah was
years.
a good.
But
I
yeah.
mean, was a very good NFL running back. To be honest with you, I mean, you guys talk about NFL running backs. There's not a lot now. Isaiah did not want to go to Alabama. He that was something that was not he did not have interest in that, and we didn't know that at the time. But Isaiah played. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. He had 5 years in the league, Matt. I mean, he did okay. I want to see what his final net.
At Georgia, it was
No.
just
His
okay.
total
Oh, net worth.
compensation in a 5-year period in the NFL. Where are we at? Career earnings. Here we go.
Seven
Was
figures.
about $6 million. No, total. Excuse me, $9.3 million. Now, that's not Matt DeBerry money, but it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I remember that came down to Georgia, Bama. Isaiah, Malcolm Mitchell came down to Georgia, Bama, and I am curious too. The one thing that I am sort of most curious about, as far as Nick and Kirby is concerned, is there was a time when Kirby very seriously talked, considered, interviewed, whatever it was, for the Georgia defensive coordinator job. And I want to know if it's accurate that Nick said, "Hey, just why go be the defensive coordinator when you could be the head coach one day?" Because that was what the discussion was. And I was listening to Feinbaum yesterday. I don't know if it was yesterday's show, but Kevin Steele was on, and he talked about how when he was at Auburn, him and Nick talked all the time. It was nothing new, So, I think that there's not nearly as much vitriol. Well, it depends on who you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking about James Franklin, usually there is vitriol, but there's not as much vitriol with these coaches as people think there is. And I walk through the players and the coaches after the game, every single game, and there's no nastiness.
No will, no beef.
Rarely. It's very, very rare. Yeah. But Nick has been a professional. He ran LSU a particular way. He ran Alabama a particular way. I mean, Nick's been a pro. It's not surprising. I would love to hear the behind the scenes stories, but Nick's the best college football coach of all time. But they would all be Alabama centric stories. I remember how much they were struggling in that national championship game in 2017, and he had to go to Tua, man. Don't you think?
I think that was the press box kind of whispers. They got 0 points at halftime. It was 13-0. Mm-hmm. Everyone said that Jalen Hurts can't go back out there. They're going to have to throw the freshman in and see what he's got. Because if they didn't, they were going to lose. They were going to lose the game.
Yep.
They had to do it, and it worked out. But yeah, I'm excited to see a happy Kirby. I think this is something where he's laughing, having a good time, with the interview process. Is something we don't really see in the press conferences. So I'm sure he'd get a kick out of telling these old stories, whether it's golf and basketball related or recruiting related or just in-game stories, how they did this, how they did that. So I think that'd be very cool.
For the record, Jalen was 3 of 8 for 21 yards. With his long was 9, and he had 1 sack. Now, Tua was not. He was better, but it wasn't like he was ripping it up. He went 14 for 24 for 100. 14 for 24 for 166, 3 touchdowns and an interception.
I thought the game was over when DeAndre Baker picked that pass off. I thought Georgia had it then. There were several times where they had it, but.
There was not fewer than 2 or 3 moments where it looked like Georgia had won the game, and at least one where it looked like Alabama had won the game.
In regulation, yeah.
In regulation, I'm talking about exclusively. That missed field goal was a stunning thing to close the game with. I mean, was that like a 29-yarder or something?
It was a chip shot.
Yes.
I don't know what it was. It should have 9 out of 10 at least that goes through. And they would have won the game right there. So that was something.
Yeah, it was. And I would be always very curious to know. We're talking about that game a lot, but there's been a lot of massive. I mean, what was Nick's reaction as Keeley ran down the opposite sideline into the end zone? This is a weird way of putting it, but I don't know what the death of Alabama under Nick Saban was. But, if Alabama wins that game, they win back-to-back national championships for the second time in Nick's career. and they, Nick did not win a national championship after Keeley, pranced into the end zone. What was that moment like for them behind the scenes? What could they have done differently? Because they didn't play for a national championship from that point forward under Nick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think down the road, maybe we can attribute that to, that's when Kirby passed Nick as the current best coach in college football.
Yes.
And if they would have beat Alabama this past year, the narrative would be Kirby retired Nick Saban, winning the final two, one for a national championship, one in the SEC championship to get them in the playoff. That's what a lot of people would remember. Like, oh, Kirby passed Nick and retired him. But,
It would.
Nick got the last win over him,
Yeah.
which I think means a lot to him deep down.
Yeah, I mean, that mattered a lot. The knowing I don't have a lot of great ties over at Alabama, but knowing one person over there relatively well, their view was that had Nick won it in 21, that might have been it, but that Kirby won it kind of pushed him further. Well, we don't know. But that was kind of their take on it. But Nick, one thing Kevin Steele was saying was that looking back on it, did make sense that Kirby that Nick would retire. But you could kind of see that. Did we ever talk about that when we were in the basement?
I think we were talking about how old he
He
is,
seemed
and
mellow.
he can't do this forever. Yeah, he didn't seem as on edge as much. It kind of seemed like he's more relaxed and having fun with the media and just kind of enjoying it, smiling
Correct.
more on the sideline instead of grabbing the face mask and getting in there, like he used to do.
But doesn't
So
that
you can kind of see it.
doesn't that prove that you can win multiple ways? You don't have to be
Yeah.
sort of the ultimate hard ass. I mean, I think a lot of people incorrectly think that coaching is just screaming at players. That's not what coaching is.
No.
That's just screaming at players. That's not the same thing as teaching and learning. And these coaches are at institutions of higher learning. This isn't the California Penal League. You're teaching men and women how their sport works and how they can get better in order to better themselves for the future. And as much screaming and yelling was put on television for Nick, and I watched Kirby more. I guess there seems like there's a lot of screaming and yelling. That's what the emotion that you see. You're not just gonna take a picture of a guy just standing there. Kirby talks to these guys a lot. He doesn't yell at them a lot.
Yeah.
He talks, and I think that matters a lot. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think it depends on the player too. He knows
Yes.
he can grill one player and then have to treat another player different. And that's what great coaches do. And I think Nick did that to a certain extent as well. But there have been a lot of times where someone just has a dumb internal penalty and Kirby kind of walks over to them and talks to them eye to eye, face to face, helmet to face, and that's it. Whereas dumb stuff like in the play, you can see him. I get really more, into it as the play's ending compared to when the play is over and the players walk into the sideline knowing they did something wrong.
I think what those coaches would talk about the most is sort of the non-football stuff, which is, what the basketball games were like, or what the golf, the thing that everybody can learn from Nick, maybe with the exception of Kirby, who I think is superb at this, is time management. I think Nick is probably the best at that we've ever seen in sport, and that adds up. Time management makes a big difference in everything. Thanks for watching.